in the scorched heart of New Mexico, 1883, where the desert whispered of vengeance and buried truths. 150 Comanche warriors didn't ride to a man's doorstep without cause, blood, justice, or war. Thaddeus Bear Mallister was about to discover which, and it would change him forever. The story began a day earlier, under a merciless sun that baked his modest ranch, nestled between the Chihuahuan Desert's red mesas and a vast, lonely nowhere. At 34, Bear was no stranger to hardship, his hands rough from wrangling cattle, his heart scarred by losses that clung like dust. His sister, Clara, lost to fever a decade ago, her laughter now just a ghost in his memory. This morning, the air felt heavy, charged with the restless hum of a sandstorm brewing. He was mending a sagging corral fence near his well, sweat stinging his hazel eyes, when a faint movement pierced the shimmering, hit a small figure staggering across the parched scrubland, drawn to the water's faint gleam. The child, no older than 10, moved like a specter, her steps faltering under hunger's cruel weight. Her traditional Comanche dress, once vibrant with intricate beadwork of turquoise and bone, hung in tatters, caked with the desert's red dust, its fringes swaying like wilted grass. Her long black hair, matted against her sun-blistered skin, caught the wind, and her dark brown eyes wide, desperate, yet fierce, locked onto the well's promise. Most ranchers in these parts would have reached for a rifle, their hearts hardened by years of raids and broken treaties. The Comanche and settlers locked in a bitter dance of mistrust. Bear was different. Clara's face, pale and fading in her final days, flickered in his mind, her voice urging kindness where others saw only risk. Those eyes, burning with defiance, held him fast, rooting him to the cracked earth. He set down his hammer, its thud swallowed by the sandy soil, and approached, slowly, his tall frame casting a long shadow over the scrubland. His chestnut hair, cropped short under a weathered gray Stetson, gleamed with sweat. His denim shirt rolled to the elbows, revealing arms tanned by years under the desert's unrelenting gaze. A leather belt, worn but sturdy, held a small knife, with a bone handle, carved with a crescent moon, a gift from his father, long buried. Up close, the girl's face was a map of survival, lips cracked like dry riverbeds, cheeks hollow, but her dark brown eyes blazed with a spirit that hit Bear like a gust of desert wind. She spoke in rapid Comanche, her voice hoarse, words tumbling like pebbles in a stream. He didn't understand, but her trembling hands, pointing to her mouth and the well, wove a story older than words: hunger, thirst, and a fight to endure. Bear's mind churned. Whispers from Mesilla, the nearest town, carried tales of Comanche unrest, their anger over stolen grazing lands flaring like a spark in dry mesquite. His ranch sat on contested ground, a sacred stretch the Comanche claimed for their herds. Its well a lifeline in the desert's heart. Helping this girl could ignite trouble his neighbors would curse him for, their voices sharp with warnings of raids and retribution. They'd call him a fool, say he was inviting wrath to his doorstep. The safe choice was clear: turn her away, let the desert decide her fate. But Clara's memory, her gentle hands braiding his hair as a boy, wouldn't let him go. Those eyes, mirroring his sister's in her final moments, demanded he act. He knelt, offering his tin canteen, warm from the sun's heat. She seized it, drinking in frantic gulps, water spilling down her chin, her small frame trembling, as if the liquid revived her very soul. For a moment, she stood taller, defiance flickering brighter, a spark of hope in her gaze. "Come on, little one," Bear said, his voice low, steady, like the desert's endless hum. He lifted her gently, her weight barely more than a sack of grain, and carried her toward his adobe cabin, its mud walls blending into the scrubland, a single chimney puffing faint smoke against the red mesas. Inside, the air was cool, scented, with cedar and the faint tang of smoke. He set her on a wooden bench by a small hearth, her dark brown eyes tracking his every move, wary but curious. The room was spar-worn, table-scarred from years of use, a single chair, a shelf with a cracked clay jug, and a faded quilt on a cot, stitched by his mother's hands, its colors dulled by time. As he stoked the fire, flames casting a golden glow across the girl's hollow cheeks, he warmed a pot of beans and cornbread, their aroma curling through the air like a promise. She watched, her gaze softening, a flicker of trust breaking through her fear, her hands clutching the tattered dress, as if it anchored her. Bear handed her a steaming bowl, her small fingers trembling as she took it, the warmth of the food drawing a faint sigh from her lips. He stood back, watching her eat, her dark brown eyes flickering with something like gratitude. But what Bear didn't know, as the desert sun sank behind the mesas, painting the sky in hues of amber and blood, was that 20 miles away, a Comanche band led by Chief White Bull had found her trail, their hooves thundering across the scrubland, their hearts set on reclaiming one of their own. What storm had Bear's kindness stirred in the desert's unforgiving heart, and would it forge a path to peace, or summon a reckoning to his door? As the Chihuahuan Desert's sun dipped below the red mesas of New Mexico, 1883, casting long shadows that bled into the twilight, a quiet flame flickered in Bear Mallister's adobe cabina, flame of hope kindled by a choice that could either save a life or unravel his own. Thaddeus Bear Mallister, at 34, had wrestled with rustlers, endured droughts, and carried the weight of grief. But nothing prepared him for the small Comanche girl, now perched on his wooden bench, her dark brown eyes a storm of fear and trust. Her tattered dress, once alive with turquoise and bone beadwork, clung to her frail frame, its fringes frayed like the desert's edge. Her long black hair matted against skin, blistered by the relentless sun. The hearth's golden glow softened the harsh lines of hunger on her face, her small hands trembling as she clutched a steaming bowl of beans and cornbread, each bite a desperate claim to life. Bear watched, his hazel eyes shadowed under his weathered gray Stetson, his denim shirt rolled to the elbows, sweat staining the fabric, a bone-handled knife with a crescent moon carving glinting at his belt. The girl's defiance, so fierce in the desert's heat, now mingled with gratitude, stirring memories of his sister Clara, whose laughter had faded to fever's silence 10 years ago. Bear stirred the fire, the crackle of cedar weaving through the cool air of the cabin, its mud walls absorbing the fading light, their earthy hue blending with the scent of dust and sagebrush that drifted through a small, cracked window. The room was sparse, a worn table, scarred from years of solitary meals, a single chair creaking under its own weight, a shelf holding a cracked clay jug, and a faded quilt on a cot. Its stitches a testament to his mother's love, now dulled. By time he handed the girl a tin cup of water, its surface etched with scratches, her fingers brushing his, light as a desert breeze. She drank deeply, her dark brown eyes meeting his, a silent question lingering. Why risk everything for a stranger in a land where trust was as scarce as rain? Bear's chest tightened, Clara's memory rising like a ghost, her gentle hands braiding his hair as a boy, her voice urging him to choose kindness, where others chose fear. "You're safe here, little one," he said, his voice low, steady, like the hum of the desert's endless wind, though doubt gnawed at his heart. His ranch sat on sacred Comanche land, its well a lifeline claimed by both settlers and tribes, a spark in a tinderbox of tensions. As the girl ate, her movements slow but resolute, her dark brown eyes flickering with life, Bear's gaze caught the glint at her neck, a necklace of intricate beadwork, turquoise woven with bone in patterns that froze his breath. He'd heard tales in Mesilla, whispered over flickering lanterns in the town's lone saloon, of such beads worn by the kin of Chief White Bull, a Comanche leader whose name carried the weight of war. Old Man Salazar, a trader with eyes sharp as a hawk, had described those patterns last month, warning of White Bull's fury over settlers encroaching on sacred grazing grounds, land where the Comanche's herds roamed free. If this girl was his granddaughter, as the beads suggested, Bear wasn't just sheltering a lost child, he was holding a key to a conflict that could burn his world to ash. His hand paused on the fire poker, the flames casting flickering shadows across his weathered face, his chestnut hair catching the light under his Stetson, his hazel eyes narrowing with realization. The smart move was to send her away, to claim ignorance before trouble found him. But Clara's face, pale in her final days, wouldn't let him turn back. He thought of Messia's dusty streets, the warnings traded like currency, Comanche unrest, raids sparked by stolen land, the well on his ranch, a coveted prize in this parched desert. His neighbors, hardened by years of strife, would curse him for this, their voices sharp with fear of retribution. They'd call him a fool, say he was inviting White Bull's wrath to their doorsteps. The safe choice was to drive her out, let the desert's harsh judgment decide her fate. But those eyes, mirroring Clara's in her last moments, held him fast, their defiance a challenge to his soul. He draped his mother's quilt over her shoulders, its faded colors a quiet vow of warmth. She curled into it, her small frame sinking into the bench, exhaustion claiming her as the fire's glow danced across her face, softening the lines of hardship. Outside, the desert night stirred, the wind carrying a faint, unsettling rhythm, hoofbeat, distant but growing closer, like a storm rolling over the mesas. Bear's heart quickened, his hazel eyes darting to the window, where the moonlight revealed only shadows and the faint outline of red rock. He stepped to the door, his hand resting on the bone-handled knife, the crescent moon carving cool against his palm. The sound grew louder, a steady pulse that echoed the desert's heartbeat. 20 miles away, Chief White Bull's band had found the girl's trail. Their eyes sharp with purpose, their hooves thundering toward his ranch, their hearts set on reclaiming their own. The fire crackled, its warmth a fragile shield against the gathering storm. But the desert's secrets were stirring. What had Bear's act of mercy unleashed in this unforgiving land? And would it carve a path to peace or summon a reckoning he couldn't outrun? As twilight bled into the Chewang Desert, New Mexico, 1883, the red mesas stood like ancient sentinels under a sky bruised with stars. Their silence shattered by the faint, ominous pulse of hoofbeats, warning that trouble was riding hard toward Bear Malister's lonely ranch. Inside his adobe cabin, the hearth's golden glow danced across the face of the Comanche girl, no older than 10, her dark brown eyes heavy with exhaustion as she curled beneath Bear's mother's quilt, its faded stitches a fragile cocoon against the world's cruelty. Her tattered dress, once vibrant with turquoise and bone beadwork, lay folded on the wooden bench, its intricate patterns a silent testament to a tie to Chief White Bull, the Comanche leader whose name echoed like thunder across the territory. Bear, 34, stood by the cracked window, his hazel eyes scanning the shadowed scrubland, his chestnut hair damp under his weathered gray Stetson, his denim shirt clinging to his broad frame, sweat tracing the lines of his weathered face. The bone-handled knife at his belt, carved with a crescent moon, glinted faintly, a relic of his father's legacy. The girl's necklace, its turquoise beads, marking her as White Bull's granddaughter, weighed on his mind like a stone, a truth that could turn his act of kindness into a spark for war. The desert's quiet hum was broken by the sharp clatter of hooves on the dirt trail, a sound that cut through the night like a blade. Bear's heart lurched, his hand tightening on the knife's bone handle as he peered through the window. The moonlight revealing 3 riders emerging from the dusk, their silhouettes stark against the fading glow of the mesas. He recognized them from Mesilla, the nearest townmen bound to him by years of shared hardship, yet divided by fear. Amos Tate, a grizzled rancher with a temper as fierce as the desert sun, his gray eyes flashing under a battered hat. Deputy Clara Vance, her badge glinting, her dark eyes sharp with duty, her name a cruel echo of Bear's lost sister. And Preacher Jonah, his white hair glowing under a black hat, his sermons heavy with judgment. Bear stepped outside, his boots crunching on the sandy earth, the cool night air sharp against his skin. He hoped to keep their voices low, to let the girl sleep undisturbed. Her small frame still curled beneath the quilt, unaware of the storm gathering around her. Amos dismounted with a scowl, his voice slicing through the stillness. Bear, you damn fool, what in God's name have you done? His weathered face, lined by years of sun and strife, was red with anger, his gray eyes burning with something close to fear. Smoke signals rose from the mesas this afternoon, Deputy Vance said, her voice steady but edged with urgency, her dark eyes studying Bear's face as if searching for a lie. Comanche signals. Word in Mesilla is White Bull's granddaughter went missing 2 days ago, lost in a sandstorm while her band scouted grazing lands. She paused, her hand resting on her revolver, the badge on her chest catching the moonlight. You wouldn't know anything about a missing Comanche girl, would you? Bear's throat tightened, the air thick with the weight of their stares, the desert's silence pressing against his chest. He thought of lying, of sending them away to buy time. But Clara's name, his sister's name, carried by the deputy, demanded truth. As if her ghost stood beside him, urging honesty. She's inside, Bear said quietly, his voice low like the desert's wind, steady but heavy with the weight of his choice. Half-starved, barely standing. I couldn't let her die. The silence that followed was heavier than the mesa's shadows, a quiet that seemed to swallow the stars. Preacher Jonah spoke first, his voice a whisper laced with dread, his white hair stark against the night. Son, you've lit a fuse that could burn us all to ash. Amos paced, his boots kicking up clouds of dust, his hands running through his thinning hair. White Bull's band doesn't ask questions, Bear. They'll think you stole her, sacred beads or not. He's raised ranches for less, whole families gone in a night. Bear's mind flashed to Messiah's dusty saloon, where tales of White Bull's wrath were traded like bullets over whiskey and fear. The Comanche leader's anger over stolen grazing lands, wells claimed by settlers, had sparked raids that left scars across the territory. Bear's ranch, perched on sacred ground, its well a lifeline in the parched desert, was a target, a spark in a tinderbox of tensions. Deputy Vance stepped closer, her dark eyes narrowing, her voice cutting through the night. I have to report this, Bear. It's my duty, but I'll give you till dawn to figure this out. Get her to White Bull before his warriors find you here. In the dark, Bear asked, his voice steady but strained, his hazel eyes meeting hers. She's too weak to walk, and I'd be a fool to ride into a Comanche camp uninvited. They'd shoot me before I could speak. That's your burden now, Vance replied, mounting her horse, her badge glinting like a warning. If White Bull comes, he won't stop at your fence. He'll burn every ranch from here to Messia. Amos spat into the dust, his gray eyes hard. You've put us all at risk, Mallister. Pray you're right about that girl. Preacher Jonah lingered, his voice soft but heavy. The Lord tests us, son. But this test may cost more than you can pay. As the riders vanished into the night, their hoofbeats fading into the desert's hum, Bear stood alone, the cool air sharp against his skin, his hand still resting on the knife's crescent moon handle. He glanced back at the cabin, where the girl slept, her small frame curled beneath the quilt, her dark brown eyes closed, unaware of the storm gathering around her. Inside, the fire's glow cast flickering shadows across the adobe walls, the cracked clay jug on the shelf glinting, faintly, a silent witness to his choice. Bear's thoughts churned Clara's face, her fevered eyes in her final days, urging him to do what was right, not what was safe. But the desert was unforgiving, and the faint rhythm of hoofbeats, now closer, pulsed like a warning drum, echoing the heartbeat of the mesas. 20 miles away, Chief White Bull's band followed the girl's trail, their eyes sharp with purpose, their hearts set on reclaiming their own. The stars above seemed to dim, as if the desert itself held its breath. What had Bear's mercy unleashed in this unforgiving land, and would it forge a bridge to peace, or summon a reckoning no man could outrun? As the Chihuahuan Desert's stars burnt cold above New Mexico, 1883, the night pulsed with the steady drum of hoofbeats, a tide of fate, rolling toward Bear Mallister's ranch, where a single act of kindness had lit a fuse no man could outrun. Inside his adobe cabin, the hearth's fading glow cast flickering shadows across the Comanche girl, no older than 10, her dark brown eyes fluttering open, stirred by the ominous rhythm outside. Her tattered dress, folded on the bench, its turquoise and bone beadwork glinting faintly, marked her as Chief White Bull's granddaughter, truth that turned Bear's heart to stone. He stood by the door, his hazel eyes sharp under his gray Stetson, his chestnut hair damp with sweat, his denim shirt clinging to his broad frame, the bone-handled knife with its crescent moon carving steady at his belt. The girl's necklace, a symbol of sacred Comanche blood, loomed in his mind, a warning that his compassion could spark a war over the contested land his ranch called home. The hoofbeats grew louder, no longer a distant hum, but a thunder that shook the desert's heart. Bear stepped outside, the cool night air sharp against his skin, his boots crunching on the sandy earth as he scanned the horizon. The mesas loomed like silent judges, their red silhouettes stark against the starlit sky. Then, from the shadows, they emerged 150 Comanche warriors, their horses forming a crescent around his ranch, their war paint gleaming in the moonlight, lances and bows poised like the desert's own judgment. At their head sat Chief White Bull, his massive frame towering, silver streaks in his long black hair catching the starlight, his dark eyes burning with a fury that could level empires. The girl stirred behind Bear, her small frame trembling as she stepped to the doorway, her dark brown eyes wide with recognition, her voice a faint whisper in Comanche, too soft to bridge the chasm between them. Bear raised his hands, palms open, his voice steady despite the weight of 150 gazes. I mean no harm, he called, the desert carrying his words like a prayer. White Bull dismounted, his movements deliberate, his leather armor creaking, a beaded war club at his side etched with symbols of battles won. You hold what is ours, he said, his English sharp, cold as the night air. My granddaughter, bearer of our sacred beads. Return her, white man, or this land drinks your blood. Bear's throat tightened, his thoughts flashing to Clara, his sister lost to fever, her gentle voice urging him to stand for what was right. She was starving, he said, his hazel eyes meeting White Bull's. I gave her food, shelter. I'd have brought her back at dawn. She's too weak to travel now. The girl stepped forward, her small hand clutching Bear's quilt. her dark brown eyes darting between her grandfather and the man who'd saved her. She spoke rapidly in Comanche, her voice rising, gesturing toward the cabin, the bowl of beans, the quilt. Bear couldn't understand, but her urgency was clear, her small frame trembling with a courage that belied her age. White Bull's gaze softened for a moment, but his warriors shifted, their bows drawn taut, the air humming with tension. You knew her beads, White Bull said, his voice low, dangerous. Yet you kept her. Did you think to barter her for this land, this world your people stole? The accusation cut like a blade, the desert's silence amplifying its weight. Bear's ranch sat on sacred Comanche ground, its well a lifeline both sides claimed. A spark in a tinderbox of years-long strife. I wanted nothing, Bear said, his voice steady, though his heart pounded like the hoofbeats that had brought this reckoning. I saw a child dying. I couldn't turn away. He thought of Messiah, the saloon's whispered tales of White Bull's raids, of ranches burned for less than a stolen glance. His neighbors, Namus Tate, Deputy Vance, Preacher Jonah had warned him, their voices sharp with fear of this very moment. Clara's memory, her fevered eyes in her final days, anchored him, urging him to stand firm. I've lost family, too, he said, his voice breaking slightly. My sister, Clara, was about her age. That's why I helped her. The girl tugged at White Bull's arm, her Comanche words spilling faster, pointing to Bear, then the cabin. Her dark brown eyes pleading. White Bull studied Bear, his dark eyes unreadable, the war club at his side, a silent threat. The warriors' bows remained drawn, their war paint a vivid promise of violence under the starlit sky. Words are cheap, white man, White Bull said. Prove your heart, or this night ends in blood. Bear's mind raced, his hand brushing the bone-handled knife, its crescent moon carving a reminder of his father's words. Kindness is a risk worth taking. He reached into his pocket, slow and deliberate, drawing a scrap of the girl's tattered dress, caught on his corral fence. This was hers when I found her, he said, holding it out. I kept it to show I meant no harm. White Bull took the fabric, his fingers tracing the familiar beadwork, recognition flickering in his gaze. The girl spoke again, her voice stronger, pointing to the cabin's hearth, miming, eating, and sleeping, her dark brown eyes fixed on her grandfather. The desert held its breath, the mesas watching like ancient gods. Something shifted in White Bull's stance, but the warriors' bows remained taut, their restless murmurs rising like a storm. Bear felt the weight of their eyes, the weight of a choice that could save or doom them all. What had his mercy stirred in the desert's unforgiving heart, and would it bridge to worlds or ignite a fire no man could extinguish? The Chihuahua Desert's stars burned fierce above New Mexico. 1883, their cold light a witness to a moment where mercy could either forge peace or shatter into war. Bear Mallister stood before his adobe cabin, his hazel eyes locked on Chief White Bull, the Comanche leader's towering frame silhouetted against the red mesas, his silver-streaked hair glinting, his dark eyes a storm of fury and doubt. Around them, 150 warriors formed a crescent, their war paint vivid under the moonlight, their bows drawn taut, ready to unleash judgment. The Comanche girl, no older than 10, stood between them, her dark brown eyes blazing with courage, her tattered dress turquoise and bone beadwork, catching the starlight marking her as White Bull's granddaughter. Bear's denim shirt clung to his broad frame, his chestnut hair damp under his gray Stetson, his bone-handled knife with its crescent moon carving steady at his belt. The M-piece of her dress, offered as proof of his kindness, lay in White Bull's hand, but the warrior's restless murmurs grew, a tide of anger threatening to drown the fragile hope. The girl spoke again, her Comanche words sharp and urgent, her small hands gesturing to Bear, the cabin, the quilt that had warmed her. She pointed to the hearth, miming, eating, sleeping, then touched her heart, her dark brown eyes pleading with her grandfather. Bear's throat tightened, his thoughts flashing to Clara, his sister lost to fever, her gentle voice urging him to stand for what was right. She says you saved her, White Bull translated, his voice low, steady, but edged with suspicion. She says you gave her food, warmth, asked for nothing. He paused, his dark eyes searching Bear's face. But my warriors came for justice. They see a white man on stolen land, holding our blood. They demand a price. The air hummed with tension, the warriors' bows creaking, their war paint a promise of violence. Bear's heart pounded, his hazel eyes steady despite the weight of 150 arrows. I saw a child dying, he said, his voice clear, echoing across the scrubland. I'd do it again, no matter her blood. He thought of Messiah's warnings, of Amos Tate's anger, Deputy Vance's duty, Preacher Jonah's dread, but Clara's memory anchored him. I lost my sister Clara at her age. I couldn't let another child suffer. The girl stepped closer to White Bull, her voice rising, passionate, her small frame trembling with conviction. She pointed to a small leather pouch on Bear's table, visible through the cabin's open door, where a faded wildflower pressed between its folds, keepsake from Clara's grave, carried always. She says you know loss, White Bull said, his voice softening, his eyes flickering to the pouch. She says your heart carries pain, like ours. The warrior's murmurs grew louder, a young brave's face scarred. His lance raised shouting in Comanche, his voice raw with defiance. White Bull's jaw tightened, his war club glinting at his side, its beaded symbols a record of battles won. Some believe mercy is weakness, he said, his gaze never leaving Bear. They demand blood to honor our land, our people. Bear's hand brushed his knife. His father's words kindness is a risk worth taking steadying him. I don't want your land, he said. This well, this ranch it's all I have. But I'd give it up before I'd harm her. The girl turned to the scarred warrior, her voice cutting through the night. Sharp and fearless, her dark brown eyes blazing as she spoke, her words a plea and a challenge. White Bull raised a hand, silencing the murmurs, the warriors lowering, their bows the air still thick with tension. She asks if we punish kindness, what becomes of us? He translated, his voice heavy with realization. She says a man who saves a child, knowing the cost, is no enemy. The scarred warrior hesitated, his lance dipping, his eyes shifting from fury to doubt. The girl stepped to Bear's side, her small hand touching his arm, her voice breaking into halting English for the first time. You good, she said, her dark brown eyes steady. You saved me. Bear's chest ached, Clara's memory merging with the girl's courage, a bridge across a divide carved by years of strife. White Bull studied the wildflower pouch. Then Bear, his dark eyes softening, though the weight of his warrior's expectations pressed like the desert's heat. This land has seen too much blood, he said. Your mercy is a test of you, of us. Return her to our camp at dawn, and we will talk, not fight. The warriors stirred, some nodding, others glaring, but White Bull's voice held them. Bear nodded, his hazel eyes meeting the girl's, her small smile a flicker of hope in the starlit night. As the Comanche rode away, their hoofbeats fading into the desert's hum, Bear stood by his cabin, the mesas silent witnesses, to a moment where peace hung fragile. In the years that followed, Bear's ranch became a meeting ground, a place where Comanche and settlers traded words, not blows. The girl grown into a peacemaker bridging two worlds. History teaches us that kindness, though costly, can heal divides. As it did in New Mexico's deserts, where a single act sparked understanding between enemies. If this story of courage and compassion moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of the Wild West, where hearts proved stronger than hate. Share your thoughts below. What would you risk for a stranger's life? The desert holds its secrets, but what truth had Bear's mercy uncovered, and would it endure under the unforgiving stars?